because you know to.
Hello. We're live. I'm Lisa Truesdell, the founder of Dreams Abroad, here with Adam Rogers. We are going to wait a little bit before everybody gets on, just to give a little bit of time, because we have about 1 minute before noon. Then I'll give a formal introduction. We'll just wait for people to come in. We can talk a little bit. Adam's in, where are you at? You're in Switzerland, but which city are you in, Adam?
In Zermatt,
Okay.
in the Alps. Yeah, the birds, sun setting at 6 p.m. here, and there's just cacophony of birds from all around. It sounds really beautiful, like a symphony.
It does sound really nice.
And there's a church bell.
Hello.
You heard the church bell? Setting at 6.
Trying to get this set up okay. All right. I'm looking at the other screen. I'm waiting for our viewers to come in. I wanted to give a special thank you this time to Tyler, our communications manager. He's in the back end, and he is like in the back end of the studio helping us with our logistical support today. So thank you, Tyler Black, very much, as we're waiting for our guests to come in. Adam, do you want to share a quick little story real quick before?
Well, today I had amazing skiing. The weather was quite warm, and I went up. I went actually to this very high area, which is about 12,000 feet, about 4,000 something meters, and I went under the rope, and I was going out over the glacier, which I like to do. I like to go. They call it hors piste, and in the French Alps. But the Swiss guy got really upset and started yelling at me, "It's danger, danger." And so I came back. I said, "No, I often go this way." He said, "No, the crevasses can open any time." And he was really upset that I was going off that way. And he really wanted me to come back. And I was trying to flag him over. "Go, come with me." But we ended up parting ways, and he went down the traditional way, and I just went out over the glacier. But it was spectacular. I mean, the day. And then I found some big rocks to kind of have a lunch on, surrounded by, it was right underneath the Matterhorn. This is one of my favorite areas to ski, and in the spring skiing is just spectacular.
Sounds like a beautiful day.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's good to connect with nature.
All right, we're about 2 minutes in.
The three-dimensional travel, when you experience a country, is to really fully experience a country. You need to spend time focusing in each of the three dimensions. The first one is obviously the things that most people do, is visiting the things that you can see on postcards. So it's going to the pyramids, it's going to the Great Wall of China, the Eiffel Tower, the Tower of London, whatever it is that you can see on a postcard, and do a selfie with that or whatever. And that's exciting. It's good to see those things. And so that is the first dimension. So like the first pillar of three-dimensional, fully responsible travel. But the second is then to meet the people who, I see Barry McPhee's here. Hey, Barry. And so the first dimension is to go and see those things that you can see on the postcards, and take a selfie in front of it or do whatever. But then spend time connecting with the people who built them, the descendants of the people who built them. So it's if you're going out to see the pyramids in Egypt, spend time with the Egyptians in Cairo and Giza around there, and learn something about their culture. Connect with them, study. Read up on their sports, their politics, something of their religion, of their philosophy, and that's the second dimension. So the first is seeing the things that we see on postcards that everybody associates with travel. The second is connecting with the people who are connected with those things. So not just see the Eiffel Tower, but connect with the French people, learn something of the language, know something of the politics, the pop stars, whatever it is, to kind of resonate and connect with the people. And then the third dimension is resonating with nature. It's spending time in nature. It's listening to the wind. It's feeling the nature. It's hugging a tree. And often these things with nature you need to do by yourself. When you go into nature with somebody, you're intellectual, you're talking and you're reminiscing, and it's nice to share a sunset with someone, but to really kind of connect with nature, I find it's best alone, to go into the desert alone or to climb a mountain alone. even if you're with people, to kind of get away and just try to tune in and sense and feel. Because I find that every part of the world, whether it's the Alps, the Himalaya, the desert, the beach, the forest, the jungle, has a certain resonance, a vibration.
Mm-hmm.
And when we connect with that vibration, we can really feel it and still our own heart and our soul and our thoughts, so that we're not thinking, we're just kind of connecting with that nature.
Right.
It's a very deep experience, and every part of the world resonates differently. And so by taking time to connect with the nature in that way, and it takes time, because you can't just, spend, okay, 3 o'clock, I'm going to go and feel the beach. No, you have to do a long walk on the beach at sunrise and listen to the waves and feel the wind, feel that, the waves as they go over your feet and that sand between your toes. And somehow each person's experience will be different. But
Right.
that nature is very important. It's very important. So the people, the nature, and then those things we see on postcards. And then, I think that's the three-dimensional experience of travel.
Thank you for that. I agree. I think going to a place solo and experiencing all the three pillars you just experienced is definitely required. So I want to give you an intro now. Can I do your formal intro?
Yes,
It's about 5 minutes in, so I think we're good. Thank you to everybody who's here. We welcome you, and I'm Lisa Truesdell, the founder of Dreams Abroad. Thank you very much for coming. And this is our wonderful guest, Adam Rogers, who really needs no introduction. I mean, he's probably one of the most experienced travelers I've ever met and read. And he's an author, a traveler, an adventurer, an explorer, an advisor, and a consultant to the UN. He is probably one of the kindest people I know. And he just wrote a book called Taking Action Online. And Adam, today I want to ask you, tell us, how are you currently taking action online?
The taking action online for the environment, social justice, and sustainable development.
Yeah.
I do a lot of things personally. I think connecting with people, inspiring people to take action with because the central message of the book is that social media can be used for good. There's a lot of the social dilemma. There's a lot of the way social media has been, can distract youth and can communicate the wrong ideas, creates echo chambers. There's a lot to be said about the ails of social media in society, but social media can be used as a force, a powerful force for good, by connecting people, inspiring people, a source of information that you can obtain and digest and use to inspire others. It doesn't, we still need taking action in the real world, which is what most of the work is. It's boots on the ground. It's getting our hands dirty. It's going in and whatever the particular challenges that we're addressing. And let me back up a little bit on that, because it's part of a bigger picture. The United Nations, the Sustainable Development Goals. It's a framework. It's an evolving framework that's come from Millennium Development Goals, the Decades of Action, the Agenda 21, which came out of Rio de Janeiro. And so there's a big picture of all that. But now it's a simple framework, rather complex framework, but it defines it in a way of the many challenges that humanity is facing at this juncture in time. And it seeks to address and solve these challenges, whether it's poverty, hunger, child malnutrition, infant mortality, maternal mortalities of women, gender equality. It's of making sure that men and women have access to the same opportunities. It's eliminating all discrimination based on race and religion and the rest of it. And I really believe that this complex, the challenges that humanity is facing, the solutions are there, and they're quite often inside us. Each of us has a unique gift, and a very unique gift and a talent that we're kind of born with. It's almost inexplicable. As we come into the world and we start to grow up and we have access to education and opportunities to expand our minds, we're all a little different, but we fit together in a mosaic. It's like a mosaic of solutions that I really believe matches the challenge. In life, on an individual basis, I don't believe we're ever confronted with a challenge that we cannot overcome. And also the challenges that we meet in life are somehow meant to help us to grow. And I think on a societal level as well. And so that's why it's particularly harmful when societies say oppress half the population, when they prevent women, for example, from getting access to education or access to opportunities. We're holding all of humanity back, because all of these people with solutions, perhaps someone with a solution for cancer, with solutions for all the different illnesses that are confronted, for solutions for for full employment, for economic solutions, everything. If we can all have access to the opportunities where we can exercise our full potential. Okay, I know that's getting a little bit bigger picture, but let's bring that down to now. Never before has it been possible for the majority of people. There's still a digital divide that's being addressed, where many people don't have access to the social media tools, to being able to get online, or at the same time, those who are online, they don't have access to the skills needed to take full advantage of that. But never before has it really, there have been so many people online with smartphones, with their laptops, connecting with one another. The new generations coming in, they connect across boundaries, across borders. There are tools that translate, and interpret languages. And so never before has it been possible for us all really to connect and to get access to information. And so that's what the book is about, really. It's meant to inspire all of us and to not be overwhelmed by the problems of the world, because every time we turn on the TV, there's wars, there's conflict, there's climate change, poverty. It can be overwhelming sometimes, but we all have a part of the solution. And even if we're far away, so in Zermatt in Switzerland, we have our smartphones. We can get online, we can get access to what the challenges are, what possible solutions are. We can start connecting with people similar to ourselves and exploring what my contribution can be. So that's what the book is mostly about, is how to harness social media. I mean, yes, it's good for entertainment. There's Netflix, but it's another example. There's entertainment on Netflix. You can watch, violent action films, and we all love those. Sometimes the romantic comedies, but there's some great documentaries. And so, it's a matter of, that balance of knowing the challenges and wanting to be a part of the solution. We can still ski and do the things that we want and watch movies and be entertained, but let's also get serious and be a player and contribute to the solutions of the Sustainable Development Goals. It's a UN framework that was framed and formulated through widespread consultations with millions of people around the world. So, but then it was legitimized and endorsed by the government, the 194 or 193 at the time member states, countries that endorsed this framework. So we have a framework, and I encourage everyone, to go online and find out what the SDGs are, and find out. And that's the book; it explains it as well. But find out where you fit in this. It's not just some faraway thing of the UN and complex and abstract, but it's really it's a practical guide, to making a difference on a personal level. That was maybe more than you asked.
No. I'm always picking up what you're putting down, but I have a copy of the book, right? I've been reading it and following along with it, and I like most other people that are on here, I've used different platforms, and I know that you just from talking to you actually signed up for different things, and TikTok, for example, and you signed up for it just to engage with the platforms and just to figure out how they're used, right, to write the book. So my question is every platform has its need, right? Has its use, right? So which because you're saying some countries can use them and there's some people that don't have access, right? So who's doing it really well right now, would you say? Which countries are doing it well? Which countries are using which platforms for what,
the platforms themselves. Yeah, absolutely. I think they're all being used well by different, and I try to highlight examples in the book that each platform can be used creatively to connect with people, social groups on those platforms. For example, with TikTok, I came across a case of a woman whose parents were Uyghur Muslims from China, and Uzbekistan, that area, and she sought to raise awareness of what was happening there that really affected her, and so and to get around certain censors, because it was a Chinese platform, she creatively, this was a girl who's like 17 years old, started a video on TikTok about how to put on mascara. It's like a makeup tutorial. And so that's like the first opening, about 30 seconds. And then she says, okay, everybody put down your makeup tools, your mascara, and Google Uyghur Muslim and find out what's happening there. And then write letters to representatives who's a U.S. citizen, but of immigrant parents. So one is that creative approach evaded the censors in China, and then and it became very popular. It was eventually taken down, but then by that point, that little video clip had gone all over to Twitter and Instagram and had reached a lot of people. So it's just one person that came up with a creative idea. But each platform, whether it's LinkedIn and Facebook, TikTok, now we have Clubhouse, Instagram, they all have communities. And so it's a matter of, this is something I've tried to do with, the SDG champions list, rise.global/SDG champions is connect with influencers in different realms, whether it's artificial intelligence or whether, it's medical equipment or, you have influencers and also in political realms, technology, a lot of influencers in the technology, connecting with them, selling them on the SDGs if they don't already know about it, and then getting them to then reach out to their networks with knowledge, information, talking about the SDGs, to engage with them and to get everybody thinking and talking about the SDGs. And so because we have to reach everyone with this passion, and everyone to kind of ask within, well, what can I do? And it can be something really simple, even helping one person, reaching out across, borders and connecting, with helping with literacy in a community somewhere, or, even locally in your own community, or with clean water resources, making sure if you see pollution somewhere in your community, going from the street into the groundwater, into the rivers, it's taking action on that, to clean it up, but mobilize with other people, contacting your local political representatives, to see how that can, each case will be different. And there are millions of cases. There's as many cases as there are people, and so we all need to be SDG champions, all nearly 8 billion of us.
I agree. I also have another question on chapter 11 on page 209 on online volunteering, because I know that there's, Dreams Abroad has a student population, and we also have, teachers abroad and people that are traveling. I know that you're talking about, volunteerism is an evolving concept. How would someone go about volunteering now, with it being with COVID being in place, and online volunteering is a great concept, right? I'm commending you for putting this in this book. I've volunteered pretty much all of my life, so I just for different causes. But how would someone go about doing it, for someone that hasn't read this yet, which I hope that everyone does pick up a copy of this book. But how would someone, because you have the Red Cross in here, and I've been a volunteer with them. But how would someone, if they want to get involved, with the UN or with other things online?
With the online volunteering, there are two things to keep in mind. Either you can maybe you start a movement, and something that you're creating to help in your community or help in your region becomes too much for you to handle, and you don't have the resources to hire people. You can find volunteers online, and I know that Gail Mowgli at ConnectAid, has done that, and she's building a network of global community advocates for the SDGs. People who are coming on and volunteering time with her, and then connecting with their local community. There are several, and I mentioned these in the book, like UN volunteers. Has a lot of online volunteering, and if you have the skill sets, there are people out there. If you're a graphic designer, there are community service organizations, NGOs in Africa that need help building a website, because they have a really good movement, something really good that they're doing in their part of the world. but they can get online. They have internet access, but they don't have the skills to build a website or to build a newsletter or a graphic. Maybe they need a logo, or translation is another big one. You know, people who, if you're fluent in a language, there's a need for communities around the world in different languages to tell their story in English or French or Spanish, or to reach other people. Because that actually is very important, because, there's so many innovations being created around the world in communities, it's diverse from Sri Lanka and Cambodia, Bolivia, people coming up with innovations to overcome poverty challenges in locations that are often much more appropriate, more sustainable, more practical than any solution coming from Harvard or MIT, or which may be some good ideas, or maybe a partnership is good, but often these are coming out and they need to connect with one another. And that's another great thing about social media and the internet, is people are sharing these ideas of what works and what doesn't, and inspiring others around the world. So and a lot of that is volunteering time, and so and volunteering can mean many different if you have a job. Some people think volunteering is sort of the luxury of the comfortable, of those who have extra time to spare to volunteer. But volunteering is often, you have midwives around the world who volunteer in their communities to bring children safely into the world, and volunteering is actually sort of the currency of many communities of exchange, where it's not written down, oh, you did this, I did that, okay, we exchange for that, but it's a spirit of goodwill of what's needed in the community. If you're walking on the street and you see a lady fall, most of us will, an older lady trying to cross the street, or somebody who's blind, or somebody's car stalls and you need help pushing it out. When we react immediately, when we say, oh yeah, without even thinking about it, what's in it for me? That's volunteering. It's like when you jump to someone's assistance and support, and I think that's human nature. I think more self-centered, when what's in it for me has come out. That's something that's come out more recently. But I think in our DNA is like we want to react and support when we see someone in need. Yeah.
All right, that's great. I commend you, Adam Rogers. you do a lot of great things, and you're inspiring many people. So thank you for that. And I was going to leave questions till the end, but if anybody has any questions right now on online volunteering or anything that we've talked about so far, please write them in now, because we're gonna talk about some photos next. So I wanted to segue into that. So if you have any questions about online volunteering or anything, you can always ask them at the end too. But just wanted to see if anybody had any questions about online volunteering. Anybody? If not, then I wanted to talk a little bit about the Intrepid Traveler, because that book was how Adam and I met. Actually, Adam, I was working as a designated school official. I was working with immigration at a university, and my hours were pretty long. And we have a question. Do you think the Peace Corps does a good job of taking action?
I would say yes. There's a time, it's not as when you have, it's within a framework. So you have multilateral support assistance to countries, and you have a bilateral. Within the bilateral, that means country to country. And so the Peace Corps represents so the U.S. government in that. And there's a VSO, Volunteer Service Organization, for the Brits. There's a French, the Japanese. So most of the developed countries, what we call OECD DAC, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development Assistance Cooperation, is for the richer countries in a way to help the poor. But within that, there are always political strings in a sense. And so the Peace Corps, they do a good job of taking action in the countries where they're mobilized, but it should also be kept in mind that they are present in countries that have a favorable political climate or political priorities of the government of that country. And so you won't see, and so for a long time, Peace Corps was big in the 1980s. I was traveling around Africa a lot in the 1980s. I first went there in 83 when I was just turned 19 on a one-way ticket to Senegal. And in the Gambia, I stayed with VSO, and I stayed, traveling often, on less than $100 a month. You rely a lot on the generosity of people that you meet. And so I would stay often with volunteer, a lot more often with locals. But you meet people working in remote communities when you're traveling on trucks and on roofs of trains, and you're not really in the main jet set. And so that's what I did for let's say 83, 84, a few years. And I went across the continent from Senegal to, and what you often saw in that time, it was interesting, is the political positioning of these superpowers, especially say between the US and the Soviet Union at the time. And so Kenya would have the Peace Corps, and then you go over to Tanzania, which was in the sort of Soviet realm, and you had Russian volunteers representing their government. And both were doing very similar things and taking action and doing, if they were teaching, there might be slight, twist on what they're teaching, but mostly it was chemistry, biology, math, the basics to kids in these villages. And so, yes, I think the Peace Corps is definitely good. Yeah, so that's, they are doing good, but there are many other opportunities of volunteering with organizations besides the political one.
My question is, how on earth do you organize your time? So many activities, so little time.
Oh yeah, I try to plan as much as possible, but I try not to be too strict with a structure. That's my travel philosophy too, is having an idea where the route you want to take, but keeping open to serendipity, so that you meet people who you learn about a new destination. You may arrive in a place that you really like and decide to stay there longer. It's like if you're going to a big conference, Ahmed, I know you're familiar with these, as I am. You have your plan on who you're going to meet, but quite often the most valuable conversations take place spontaneously, serendipitously, in the corridors. When you meet the right people at the right time and you make the connection, and then you go to the meeting that was planned, or you might have to postpone something. So it's both having, I think what I try to do is I both have, I use my agenda system, Outlook, all of that. I try not to miss meetings, because that's, you set them up and people are there, waiting for you. So I organize meetings at time and try to make the best use of that time, but at the same time, being open to spontaneity and serendipity. But yeah, there's so much to do, a lot of activities, and life is just so full. Yeah. And then once in a while, I'll just check out. I'll need to regroup, recharge, and I'll just go. That's what I'm doing here in Zermatt. I just came here for a week, rented a small apartment, doing some skiing, but doing a lot of writing. I'm catching up on backlog with my clients with UNDP, and listening to the birds.
Okay. I think I see another question from Edgar. So many communication tools and social media platforms come and go. How do you decide which ones to learn and master?
As I mentioned before, I think it's important to be driven by the purpose, by the mission. And so if you're trying to reach a certain community with the message, you're trying to engage with that community. If you're trying, if you want to, connect with Gen Z, right? Gen Z, Generation Z, at that level, what are they using? And within that community, what tools are they using? So it depends on who you're trying to connect with, at least for purpose-driven communication and outreach of the type that that I write about in Taking Action Online for the SDGs, for sustainable development, the environment, social justice. So it's, sometimes, let's say, for example, I used an example with UNDP. That's the organization I'm most familiar with in the UN, although I've worked in quite a few with others. But just for this example, after the big explosion in the port area last August, they needed to mobilize quickly and assess the socioeconomic needs, the emergency on the ground. And so and they want to use social media to do this. You could go out, on the streets and talk to people, but that would take a lot more time. We discovered that in Lebanon, Facebook penetration had gone up to from March of 2020, for the beginning of the pandemic, up to 97% of the population was on Facebook. And so they were able to do the paid advertising on Facebook, targeting women. First they do a survey and it was 60 or 7% men, but then on Facebook, you can target just women at particular ages, just teachers, youth. And so they were able to construct a very accurate socioeconomic assessment of the reality on the ground. And from that, advise the government and where to channel and how to respond to meet the needs where they were greatest. And so for that particular instance, Facebook was the best tool. But it started with an assessment. Okay, here's what we want to do. Here are the people we want to reach, and then find the tool that fits, rather than picking a tool and trying to make it fit one's reality. And so, you find on social media, LinkedIn has a certain appeal, and you might have people very similar on Facebook and LinkedIn, the same person's on both, but the way the communication is structured is different, and so you appeal differently to sensibilities of people depending on the channel that you're using. So AJ,
he's AJ, Adam, I want to use my skills and knowledge in business and marketing to help the UN with creating their goals, but I'm not entirely sure how. What advice would you give me? I'm currently interning in the FMGC industry.
Yeah, with the UN, there's always a need, and there's always a call for internships for professionals. It's to be of value coming into the UN. Like you said, the skills and knowledge. It's acquiring the skills and knowledge and experience, especially in the developing world context, in the field, and having the advice I often give to people is going there. The vacancy announcements. There's each organization, UNDP, UNICEF, UNEP, the UN Secretariat. You can go to unjobs.org, UN's jobs list, and look at what's available and sort of identify your dream job. And if you don't have the skills and knowledge yet, what I advise is turning that into your to-do list. So if they require languages, often at the UN is having, the official languages. If you have a command of as many of them as possible, English, French, Spanish, Russian, Arabic, and Chinese. That's pretty important. Management skills are important. People skills are important. And then once you have that, that list is checked off, that you have as many of that, it's, try to do online volunteering, get noticed, do internships with UN organizations, apply to those internships, and then, never give up. I'll just have a side note. I worked 22 years as a staff member before taking early retirement. But when I was an undergraduate and getting a degree in political science, international affairs, I remember writing a letter, and I had traveled around the world, and I had pretty good command of a few different languages. I remember writing a letter to the UN and asking exactly that question that you asked me just now. And I got a response, and this is when we had to do everything in letters and envelopes, and the response I got was rather discouraging at that time, that I just forgot about that. Well, I'll go on, and there was other opportunities that came up. And when I did join, I was headhunted. I was involved in the private sector, and it's sort of a long story, but I ended up falling into it unintentionally, and I'm staying longer than I originally intended. But if your skills are needed there, and if you can fit with the right people, and if that's what you feel that is in your DNA, that's your destiny in a sense, and then don't give up. I mean, keep trying, your tenacity, and eventually somebody will notice. But there are many other opportunities too, working with government and non-governmental organizations. The UN has, it's not really the UN's goals, they're our goals, the humanity's goals. The UN helped facilitate a process that the goals were articulated and presented and made available, and there's accountability in achieving them at each country level. But it's really our goals, and it has to happen at all levels, in business, in the private sector, civil society, youth, all of these levels. It's something you can do every day in your own life. Lisa, next.
Yeah, okay. So I think we've got our questions for now, and what I'd like to do is, I think I was about to talk about the Intrepid Traveler book and how I received it. And I was working, and I was an international student advisor at the time, and I received Adam's book. This is before we met each other. And it was, it was probably one of I'm just encouraging everyone to, I know that there's online books and you can get them on Kindle, but I received this book, and I didn't know Adam. I just want to give you a little shout out, Adam, because I have my little, book, but I received this book, and it meant a lot. I was working really long hours, and it says here, for Lisa, may all your travels lead to illuminating horizons. Adam Rogers, April 2019. And I hadn't met Adam yet. And we just actually met officially just recently in Washington, and that was when he signed my next book, Taking Action Online. And I look forward to continuing to work with Adam, but for forever now until, who knows when. But Adam, I just wanted to tell you thank you so much for this book, because your travels have inspired me for whenever the pandemic is through to continue on. And this book, I read it, and I've been, it's holding a copy of a book these days it means a lot, so getting into that, I wanted to take a minute to look at some of these photos here that I don't think that they're in the Intrepid Traveler book, but I wanted to take some of because this book is I mean, for me, it's a tool, but it's also your stories, and your travels around the world are just incredible. And so, Tyler, if you could put up some of these photos, I wanted to actually ask you about them and see if you could tell us, name that photo and tell us where you are.
That's in Algeria. That's in southern Algeria, not far from the Mali border. I was 19 years old. This was 1983, probably around March or about April 1983. I had flown to Africa, just turned 19 on a one-way plane ticket. I didn't have enough money to fly back. I had sent some money ahead on traveler's checks to a family in Aix-en-Provence, family of a French teacher I had early on. And so I'm coming across I went Senegal, Gambia, Mali. And from Mali, I needed to go across Algeria and then across the Mediterranean to get to France. And so I just traveled. We're traveling from Goa, Gao, in Mali. It come to me, and up across the Route de Tannenshoeft to a town called Adrar. But this was not far from the Mali border. And I got passage in the back of a big truck with sheep and goats, and a couple of canisters of diesel fuel to get us across the desert. And whenever it took about 10 days to go across the bulk part of the desert. The Sahara is all flat. Once in a while I get these ergs, these big, the dunes, but most of it's just flat. And whenever we could get water, we would. In the evening, we'd kill a goat, and we'd separate the skin from the meat, and then use that to fill up with water at these different stations. And so we all had to. That's me in the middle, pulling water out of a well, and then we put it. And then interesting to note for the food, we take the goat. We'd also have flour and water, which we mix together into for making bread. We dig a hole in the sand, pour the mixture of the flour and water into the hole, cover it with sand, build a fire on top of that, grill up the goat, right, pieces, and then when the meat was ready, we could dig into underneath the fire and get the bread, and just rinse it off a little bit, and so we'd have goat meat and bread. But yeah, that's Algeria, and then from there, travel north up to the Gardaïa and the Atlas Mountains and down to Algiers, and from there I was able to get on a ship. It took me across the Mediterranean. I had like maybe $15 in my pocket that left because of some expenses in Mali. I only had a few hundred when I arrived in Africa, but I was able to get up to Algiers, get a ship to Marseille, get out on the highway and hitchhike and get to Aix-en-Provence with those clothes, and then regroup and continue my travels. But the first edition of the Intrepid Traveler was that. It was backpacking, exploring the world on under $100 a month. I went around the world, 50 countries. It took me 5 years. I originally set off, I thought it would take a couple, but the world was much bigger. And I kept going north and south. I originally thought I'd just go around the world, but most of the continents are on, north-south axis. So you get to Africa, I went north, but then I only saw West Africa. I went around Europe, around through the Middle East, Syria, and then all the way back down to Africa as far as the Zimbabwe, South African border, back up to Burundi, and then across Asia. It just took a long time. India and subcontinent, that was a whole year right there. Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. So it took me 5 years to get all the way around. And then I documented that experience in terms of travel advice, and that was the first Intrepid Traveler. The edition that you have, the third edition, came much later. That came just a couple of years ago, and that I've had children since then and traveled as a couple. So it's about traveling alone as opposed to traveling as a couple, traveling with kids. When you travel with children, they and you experience the country through their eyes. it's like a whole different travel experience, and you connect with other families. And there's also, exchange. We can exchange your home with a family in another part of the world, and they have kids, at the same age, the same size, and exchange toys, and then you meet their neighbors. And traveling as a family, if I hadn't done that, that's another dimension to travel. That you can travel as a backpacker and then go back, but also traveling as if as a UN official or as a business Fortune 500 executive or CEO or CFO. As I put, in the first edition, I thought you had to have a backpack to experience the world and really experience it. But then as I got older and experienced travel in different ways, it's really it doesn't matter whether you have a suitcase or a backpack or somebody's carrying your clothes for you, or whether you're spending $1 a day or $1,000 a day. It's most important is that you have an open mind and an open heart, and that you experience travel to these different dimensions, and you somehow the places you leave the place a better person, and somehow people that you've met, that you've eaten a meal with, they've learned something about your culture, and there's been an exchange. And so it's no longer, so the third edition is a bit more of a mature Intrepid traveler, whereas the first and second edition it's more about the rugged backpacker and $1 a day sleeping outside on the park bench, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay, Tyler, next photo. Where is this one?
Oh, there we go. Okay, that's Guatemala. After I traveled around the world, all the way around, I moved to Arizona to live with and take care of my grandmother and pursue an undergraduate degree at Northern Arizona University in the political science, international affairs. And I wanted to learn Spanish. I was taking some classes there, but I was like, it's hard for me to study a language outside the country where it's spoken. So I thought, well, I'll go spend the summer. And, I heard about language schools, or there were these offers through the university where you organize everything and then they send you to Guatemala. And I thought, look, I'll just go down there and check it out myself. So I to San Diego, got on bus across in Tijuana. I traveled by bus and train and some hitchhiking through Mexico into Guatemala, arrived in Antigua. And there, right at the bus station, this kid, are you here to study Spanish? And I said, yeah, I'll come to the school. I'll show you. So I went to the school, Escuela de Idiomas, and they connected me right away with a teacher and classes and a host family. And so that was my host family when I was studying Spanish in Antigua.
Okay, next. That's unbelievable, by the way.
And studying there were other Americans or Anglo-Saxons studying English, but I made it a rule to avoid them. And if somebody and stuff, and also the locals wanted to learn English, but you'd have to pretend, I don't speak English, because you need to really speak the language in full immersion. Okay, here, when I was with the United Nations Capital Development Fund, traveling to all the least developed countries, about 40, between 40 and 50, everywhere from Mozambique and Madagascar to Thailand, Cambodia, Bolivia, Nicaragua, everywhere, documenting. I'd go out and document through photography and videography stories of the impact of our development work in the local communities, far from the capital. So this was in Pitsanulok in northern Thailand. I was visiting a project that was sponsored, funded, organized by the Global Environment Facility. They had a small grants program where they work giving small grants to community organizations and also technical support, working on different areas of community support, environment, poverty reduction, et cetera. So in this particular case, what they call development communication, working out with communities to get them to change behaviors, adopt with new information. And in the old days, say in the 60s and 70s, 80s, in development work, it was always a top-down approach. It's like the smart guys. We're from MIT, we're from Harvard, we're from the big city. We have all the ideas. We'll help you, to do things better. But that didn't work very well, because we learned that in communities, people only listen to sort of influential people, influencers in their community. And so, there are many studies on this, whether you're trying to convince women to boil the water before they put their rehydration formula for babies, or infant formula for babies, boiling it first. That was a lot of work in South America. So in this particular case in Thailand, there was a problem with coconut husks being, after eating the coconut and breaking it, they're just left everywhere in this part of Thailand. And people were cutting down trees for cooking. So there's a lot of deforestation. And so who came up with the idea, both with the community, but most, again, it can come from, institutes of higher learning or the capital, but if you come down with the information top down, it doesn't take. And so in this community, we worked with the monks, because in Thailand, people revere and respect the monks. So we worked with some monasteries in the region, and taught them and worked with them to show how the coconut husks, they can be converted to charcoal, which solves the deforestation for the most part. People can cook with the charcoal, and it burns for a long time when you make charcoal with the coconut husks. But also they had a problem with malaria, and that was in part, from the coconut husks that are left on the ground. They fill up with water, and mosquitoes, German, they lay the eggs in there and they hatch, and the problem with mosquitoes, especially the Anopheles, mosquito that spreads malaria. And it's also tires that are left out, and there are other problems as well, but it contributed to the solution. And so I was there to talk to the monks, to see, how they learned about the program and how it was working with the community, what challenges they had, some stories of success. And so I spent a whole day interviewing them. And so at the end, they took my picture with them, with the monks. Yeah, the cameras were much bigger back then.
Yeah.
I had to carry, like 3 bodies and 7 lenses, and plus the video and stuff. And so I was always carrying all the camera equipment when I was out in the field like that.
Okay, well that's you have a whole treasure trove of photos. So that's only 3 of the very many that Adam Rogers has amongst his library. Yeah. So thank you for that.
My next book, I hope to capture I've been to way more than 80 countries, but what I want to do is I'm writing the stories around the world in 80 stories. Yeah. And go alphabetically and pick the countries with interesting stories like that, and write more detail and texture and context and names and conversations, and so that's what I'm working on now.
I look for. Well, I'm a fan. I can't wait for the next time you can come back on and speak to us about around the world in 80 countries. We'll be waiting to hear about that book. So
my view with you guys. The church bells are ringing. You see that?
Yeah, it looks nice. looks awesome. Wish we were there.
Well, you are virtually.
Enjoy the view. I know. We'll be there soon, all of us. Well, around the world and traveling, hopefully sometime soon. Does anybody else have questions that we can ask Mr. Rogers before he enjoys the rest of his evening in Switzerland? Does anybody else have questions? I know that I have one question for you, because Adam has been a part of Global Foodie Friends, which is starting up actually again in May 7th will be our first Global Foodie Friends on Twitter. It's at GFoodie Friends. We talk about cuisine and eating locals and everything from around the world on Twitter. So meet us there on May 7th. But my question for you is what is the most interesting meal that you've shared with a local? Because that is what you say is interesting. You've never been to a country unless you've eaten with a local, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
For different reasons. One is for the local food, but when you eat with somebody, barriers are dropped and it becomes more informal, and it's like breaking bread, in the Christian sense, it's when let's break bread, because there's a bond with food. And so when you travel someplace, if you travel and only eat food from your own country, if you're, because you can do that as Westerners now. You can find Burger King, you can stay in America, you're missing opportunities really too. And I guess you could eat your food with a local, but it's when the local person introduces you to their cuisine, and especially if they're invited into their home, and you eat in the way and take time, because there's some cultural sensitivity to this. So eating with your hands, for example, and there are different ways. If you're eating with your hand in West Africa, or if it's in India, or in the Middle East, it's slightly different. So learn and say and express, I want to learn, and be aware. And you can prepare beforehand, like never touching the food with your left hand. The left hand stays in your lap, and then you work with the right hand. When you do that, you're somehow you're brought into the culture a little bit. Otherwise, you're an outsider. But when you're invited into a home and you're sitting down and you're eating in the local way, and they may try to give you knives and forks because you're a Westerner. They might so you can sit on a chair, not on the floor, but really try to do it the way the local people are doing. If it's sitting on the floor, sit on the floor. Maybe a pillow may help, a cushion or something. But try as much, and then they will see that you're trying, and explain. Yes, it would be easier with a knife and fork, but I really want to learn. Eating with chopsticks. Many in the West we can eat with chopsticks now, but knowing, Thai food, for example, is not chopsticks. It's a fork and a spoon. But knowing these little differences on the food, it really enriches the travel experience and connecting with the people, and they see that it's happening, and it can go on. Remember in Syria, for example, staying, with families there, the food just kept on coming, and you learn that you can't say it's enough. You have to say, Alhamdulillah, thanks be to God, Alhamdulillah. Before you eat, saying Bismillah Rahman Rahim, Bismillah, before you eat, that's all part of the food. So it's saying in the name of God. It's giving sort of like grace, but it's acknowledging the privilege of having food and the difficult. Not everybody has that, so it's it's sort of it's just acknowledging a lot, and it's part of that cuisine cultural experience. In terms of strange things, I'm an advocate, as my other book, No Mammal Manifesto, for a reduction in the production and consumption of mammals, especially when we have a choice, and that's on a certain level. But being flexible when you travel, and that's not a radical, I have to cut it out, and that's another conversation. But I eat anything when I'm pretty much, and I did it, especially when you're traveling with locals, and they may, and you have to be a lot of communication. So if they kill a goat in your honor, that's the wrong time to tell them that you're a vegetarian, because they've done it in your honor. So being flexible is pretty good. If not, it's being forthright and communicating what your dietary restrictions are. So that's the interesting foods are for interesting in different places. The Philippines having balut with local. It's an egg. It's a duck egg that it forms. It's been fertilized, and then the duck is inside there, and then they boil it and you eat it. So you can kind of see a little baby duck in there, and it's hard for some people to kind of, but it's they weren't that bad. So that's eating like grasshoppers in Thailand. That's like a big delicacy.
Yeah,
it's like popcorn. You can sit down and eat these things. Eat insects, locusts.
The insect would probably be easier for me. I've had that, but that was in Mexico. But the baby duck, I think, would be a little harder.
That's a tough one.
Harder to eat. Did you eat that?
It's not like a main. Yeah. It's mostly among it's like a bonding with men. And you have the San Miguel beer, and you have and the thing is, when you do that, when you find out what that is, it also breaks it breaks the ice, and it brings you inside, and you feel after you've done it. Something when you've eaten something that they might think is difficult, that is, they know it's difficult for you. It's different. When they see that you do it, even if they see that you're comfortable with it, being comfortable and being kind of like, it's like you're one of them, and it's sort of a way to be kind of inside. And in traveling, gaining that inside feeling, is it's wonderful. I mean, it's a real, it's a rewarding experience in travel when people. They won't fully accept you of one of them, but you start to feel like you're kind of coming in a little bit, rather than being a foreigner and then being at arm's length, or being like, possible way to make money from this guy or something, customer or whatever. When you go from a customer client to being like someone inside is a big step. It's important, and then being comfortable.
Okay, we have got one more question from Tyler Black. What's one experience abroad you wish you could relive?
Oh, I do all the time. If I wish, I do. I have no wishes. I don't do.
So what do you do? What is it? What's one experience?
Like the skiing in Switzerland. That's one thing I relive again and again. I spent 4 months over the pandemic here. It's just something I love to do. I love skiing in the Alps. I mean, I did go to Colorado once over this winter, but So if I can, let's do it. I just plan to do it again. Kilimanjaro, it was an incredible climb in the 80s. Now I'm doing it almost every year, but with a cause, with a group called the Kilimanjaro Initiative, where we take disadvantaged, marginalized youth from slums in East Africa, teach them leadership skill, outward bound kind of training, and then bring them to the top of the biggest mountain in Africa. This year we're doing it for COVID-19, equitable distribution of COVID vaccines. So I try to wrap something I love to relive around some kind of cause as well.
Yeah, is there, if someone wants to participate with that in the Kilimanjaro initiative, can they, is that still available to do, or how does
Yeah,
someone
to
get
get
involved
information.
next year?
Yeah, we just the climb this year is in October. We're going to
Okay.
leave base camp about 19 October and reach the summit of Kilimanjaro on October 24th, UN Day. And then
Oh,
there's a lot
nice.
of preparation going on now for sponsorships and trying to, getting media partners and all of this involved. But the website we just launched last week is just thebigclimb.org. And there's
Okay.
also a Twitter. I just launched, I think the day before yesterday, I put a Twitter account together, and that's slowly growing. So if people can follow it, that'd be great. But you can
Okay.
just search for the Big Climb. Yeah.
The Big
And
Climb.
we're trying to inspire people around the world to organize climbs of their own. I mean, we'll do the one in Kilimanjaro, which is massive, but for COVID-19, equitable distribution, because vaccines just aren't reaching the whole, and it could be
Yeah.
really dangerous in the future if we only vaccinate the 20% of the people in the north or in the richer countries, or the elites in the developing countries, and if the virus gets a chance to mutate more beyond what the current vaccines are able to address, then we're going to have this. It could get worse and worse. The pandemic will just be cyclical, and it'll spiral out of control. But we need to really get the vaccines out there, like we confronted yellow fever. A lot of these diseases. Cholera has been taken down. Trying to think, I can't think, but there's been several diseases. Malaria is under control for the most part, that we've been able to with vaccines. Yellow fever is a big success with vaccines that we've been able to, but the vaccines had to get out everywhere, and we all had vaccine passports. A lot of countries wouldn't allow you in if you weren't vaccinated against yellow fever. I mean, in the 80s and 90s, traveling around, we always had to show the yellow fever vaccination. I'm in Zermatt. He's asking.
Yeah.
I'll go back to Geneva next week.
All right. Well, it's been a lovely almost hour, Mr. Rogers. That flew by, Adam. Yeah, it really did. And you'll be skiing the rest
Sorry
of the
about
week.
the noise.
That's
I'll be
fine.
here the rest of the week.
Okay.
Can you hear all this stuff?
I can. It reminds me of Spain. Actually, it's a very lovely sound.
That's nice. Okay, well, thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah.
Lisa.
Thank you,
thank you to everyone who participated.
Good luck with your skiing, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Yeah, great.
Thank you. Bye-bye.